Here are all the peppers. Tomatoes are doing good here. And this is what's left over from the cauliflower and broccoli. These are some Hawaiian chili peppers that I think are going to be really spicy. Behind them we have rosemary, so those two couldn't be any different. And then this one is chamom away. If you know, you know. Back here we got some cumin. Then we got the valyan. This is like catnip on steroids. The cats absolutely go crazy for this. It's frog hour. Landscape fabric holding up over there so far. So a lot of the potatoes have popped up and they're looking pretty good. Got some potato flowers right there. I think that if that potato goes to seed, and not just like a seed potato, but an actual little seed, I will try to collect those this year. Potatoes don't always create flowers, they don't always create those fruits, and they're in the same family as tomatoes, so they do look kind of like tomatoes, but they are toxic, so don't eat them. So you can start to see pretty clearly the square pattern that I used for my plants right here with the seeding square, and you can kind of see how I just veered off to the left a little bit as I planted. Oh well. And then down in this row right here, that's where I ran my mechanical cedar, and you can really see all the radishes on the outside. You can see all the arugula on the second line there. Frogs are everywhere. One right in the path here. The asparagus is now taller than I am. Another rainy day, so the plants are back on the shelves. Got the tomatoes, got the peppers in here. This is also an apple that I planted from a supermarket apple seed. And then down here, I've got a cat. We always have cats around here. I just planted these about 2 days ago. If we open the lid, we might lose them to the predator back there. So the back left tray is mostly cantaloupe, as well as some honeydew. The back middle and the front row, we've got the quick snack cucumbers. On the back right, we got more cucumbers. Those are mostly Corinto. Front right, we got some sunflowers. These are the teddy bear flowers in the middle. I think these are the mammoth sunflower on the left. It's got some green machine zucchini right here. Spaghetti squash. Then over on the left, we've got watermelon, which is natu cocoa, crimson sweet, and sugar baby. Well, we've had quite a few cold and rainy days, but the weather today is 72 and sunny, so it feels like it's already summer. And that reminds me that I've got a lot of trays to take care of. So why don't we go take a look at that. So right behind me is the product of a whole lot of seed starting. This is definitely one of my favorite things to see this time of year. And I started these on April 9th, and it's now May 13th. So that means that they've been in those starting plugs for about a month now. So why don't we take a look and see what the roots look like. So if I take out one of these trays right here and take a look at the bottom here, you can see that the roots have reached the bottom and they are starting to really form, and when they start to wrap around the bottom, that means that they are about to become root bound. And we do not want that, because that's almost as bad as letting them die, or maybe just not even planting them at all. Oh man, what happened in this tray? Looks like that side didn't grow. So after a while, you can kind of tell based on the plug size when things are getting a little too big for their container. But there's a few in this one that need a little attention. And just to say it, this tray really needs water right now. I left these out overnight for the first time last night, and I think between yesterday and today, they drank a lot of water. So when the plants are starting to get just a little too big for their container, there's really only one way to fix it, and that's to get a bigger container. But if I was to take this poor pepper right here, which needs water, and put it inside this container, it's just a little too big for it. So something like this, a 4-inch pot, is a better choice than that giant bucket. They say you want to roughly do about 3x the size when you are up potting, But there's also, in my opinion, one exception to that, and that is when you're planting in the ground. So if the weather outside is still too cold for the plants, and it will be for at least another week or two, you probably want to consider doing something like this so you can keep them inside when you need to. But for me, it's 70 degrees outside. It's about a week and a half past the last frost, and I'm feeling pretty good about being able to plant my summer crops in the ground. So in this tray, we have peppers, and each one of these 12 packs here has 2 different types of peppers in it. So that's about 12 different types of peppers in this tray alone. And then over here, the next tray, these are all my tomatoes. And as you can see, most of these are pretty tall, and I would say about ready to go in the ground. I did have a couple of, well, casualty right here. This one kind of snapped. And that's why I start too many. You never know what's gonna happen. Pussy Will's really gotten tall. It's really grown well this year. And while we're over here, why don't we take a look at the pond? It's really coming to life. See all the tadpoles down there? So there's a healthy frog population, and there's probably hundreds of tadpoles in here now. All right, well, let's head back to the plant trays. So this is officially day 1 of acclimation for this tray. Got a whole variety of gourds in here, from cucumbers to cantaloupe to honeydew, and this was only started about a week ago. And while we're at it, we've got a few more plants here. These are the big moose pumpkins. You can see that they are just starting to poke through the soil here, but these are actually pretty light right now, so I'm gonna get some water into these and a few of the other trays. Oops. This time of year, it's important to keep an eye on all of your trays and making sure that they are getting watered, because just a few days of no water can have some serious effects on your plants. And generally speaking, at this stage, I will water these plants every couple of days, assuming that they feel somewhat dry. And the easiest way to tell if these need water is just to pick up the tray, because you can really feel the water weight when you pick it up. And when it's dry, it feels very light. So the more involved you are in working with your plants, the easier it is to tell. So I can tell that these are fine, and I watered these yesterday, so I'm gonna put these aside. Now when you pick up this tray, half of the plants are gone, so it's gonna be a little bit different. So it feels a little light, but the second thing you can do is just take a look at a couple as an example, put your finger on them, and that one is still wet. But just make sure to check a few, because if you're tapping one where the plant died, well, yeah, it's probably still gonna be wet because there's nothing drinking that water. And now for the tomatoes, this one feels way too light. So I'm gonna go ahead, take out this corner tray, and I'm just gonna fill water into the tray, not over the plants. It's gonna go just into the tray, and these are gonna be able to absorb that water. And it helps to fill all the way to the top of the tray if you can. If you're inside, don't try it, it's gonna spill. If you're outside, just do it. You can see that this is probably, no, it didn't spill, but it's close. These peppers are also too dry. So let's go ahead and do the same thing. So when you get to this point, just give it 15 to 20 minutes and you'll start to see water absorbing into the soil. I really prefer not to do this, but I'll just highlight one of the downsides of having so many different types of plants within a tray. So this one here, the plants are just a little bit bigger and they're just drinking more water. So this tray I can tell needs a little bit of water. And the rest of them are okay. So now we're mixing watering dates. So I can water this one individually by putting it in this tray and filling that tray with water first. But now this one might have water, when these ones don't. So when you go to check your tray, if you check this one and you don't check the other ones, well, they're gonna be different. So while we're waiting for those trays to get their water, why don't we take a look at how the new shade cloth is doing in the winter garden. So far, I've really appreciated having the extra shade above me, but I'm not entirely sure if it's been too much shade for some of these crops. In particular, I did not plant the peas here with the shade in mind. But as you can see, they're still getting a little bit of late afternoon sunlight, and they also get some morning sunlight. But it's a good experiment, and we'll just see what happens this year with those. But more importantly, it's been a little over a week since I planted all of these. And overall, they're doing pretty good, but there are a few issues. So it might not be obvious at first sight, but as you walk down, you notice this one right here is missing. And we keep walking and the rest looks okay, but if we take a look at the cauliflower over here, well, that one's missing. Something happened to this one. It looks like it's been munched on, and this one also. And I'm not a huge fan of that. So I thought this side of the garden was gonna be better protected from predators. And by predators, I mean those furry little rabbits that everyone kind of likes. So really, that's what the tray of leftover broccoli and cauliflower is for. I think I have 4 or 5 that have gone missing already. And there's really only one thing to do about that, and that's to chalk that up to a garden mistake. While we're talking about garden mistakes, I think I committed a second foul. So here's the endive, and I'd say that's looking pretty good for what it is. The Gatsby bib is looking okay, or at least it's still alive. But when we get to the Chinese cabbage, well, what happened? It disappeared. Do you guys see any Chinese cabbage in here? Because I don't. Well, I see one. This thing right here, which I'm not gonna lie, I'm afraid to touch these because the last couple I touched, well, they just ripped right out. They were dead. And here's the arugula, which I don't really care about because I've got hundreds over there. And let's just forget about the celery. So don't be fooled. If you thought that I could just plant lettuces uncovered and let them grow, well, no, you're wrong. I'm wrong. That's not what I thought. I thought about covering the lettuces. I just didn't do it. And I just really wanted to show everyone what happens when you don't protect your lettuces. Yeah. All right, well, why don't we look at something a little less depressing? Just look at how big the asparagus has gotten. But it's not just that one. Several of these are already almost 7 feet tall. And it really is just an asparagus forest. And all of the row plantings that I did, well, that's pretty much working out perfectly right here. Now, I will say that with all of the anticipation and growing asparagus and waiting for it to pop up, and they all look so good and they taste so good, that the window to cut and eat them, it's very quick. And you can probably see here that every one of these that's already gone to seed like this, it's just not going to be good to eat. I mean, you could give it a shot, but I wouldn't recommend it. It just doesn't taste the same. But some of these crowns will just keep popping up some new asparagus for the next few weeks, and there'll be an opportunity to just keep eating as I please. And did I mention that all the asparagus in the front here? Well, I kind of forgot about these, and now we have all sorts of asparagus here too. So this is the benefit of not eating the asparagus in the first 1 to 2 years. You can see you're just gonna develop some really healthy looking asparagus. And yeah, these are all strawberries, so we're gonna have quite a few very soon. And you can even see some of the smaller ones starting to form down in here. And the chives. All right, so now that it's been about 20 minutes, these plants have definitely gotten enough water. And one thing you need to do is empty out the excess water. You don't want them just sitting in excess water. It will kill the plants if you leave them in there for too long. So I have a little trick here. There's actually 2 trays here, and I can pull this tray out, and you can see down at the bottom here, this one has holes in it, and it's going to drip out any excess water there. And I'm gonna do the same thing with the peppers. So another thing that I think happened with these lettuces is that some of these were just too small, and we had several days of rain, and I think it just happened to kind of wash out some of the cubes. And that was really just me being a little bit too impatient. I probably should have up potted them into bigger cubes, the 2-inch size, or maybe just given them a few more days in those cubes, and oh well. So all that talk about watering peppers and tomatoes, and this whole time, the reason I came outside was to plant some peppers and tomatoes. And now I realize that there's only about an hour left of sun in the day here. So I gotta get some work done quick. But before I do, there's one thing I have to decide. Because I put the shade cloth over there, and because that's typically where I plant my tomatoes and peppers because of the overhead trellising, I no longer have a dedicated spot for my tomatoes and peppers. But technically I haven't planted anything in this row right here or this row right here. So I haven't given this a ton of thought, but I think I have to make a quick decision here. Otherwise, I'm just gonna run out of time. So what I think I'm gonna do is use the outside of this row right here all the way down, except for the sage. I'm gonna plant hot peppers. And the reason for that is that I've got rabbits that come from the east and they head west. And when they're trying to travel across and get to some of those leafy greens, if they smell those pepper plants, they're gonna turn right around. So first, I'm gonna get this row all cleaned up, and then we're gonna get the peppers all the way down the row. But even more first, I have to kill a ton of tomatoes. Just check out this big grouping of volunteers right here. These are all tomatoes, so we're gonna have a whole bunch that I'm gonna have to rip out. And not only that, but there's a lot of carrots and cilantro in there. If I did nothing this year to that row, I guarantee I would get something out of it. But alas, I've got some peppers to plant, and I've got even less time. So let's get going. All right, so I got this row cleaned up pretty quickly, and I just grabbed a few things to help make planting a little bit easier. So the first thing I brought is the tape measure, and I'm just gonna take this and put it alongside the row so that I can evenly space each of these peppers out by about a foot. And next up, I've got my jumbo popsicle sticks. Then I brought some bamboo stakes, and these are 16 inches tall. And don't get fooled, don't go to a garden store and pay top price for these. What I do, and I guess you could call this a garden hack, is I just buy barbecue skewers. And people don't want to pay a lot of money for barbecue skewers. Garden supply places, they think we want to pay a lot for skewers, which we don't. And last but not least, I've got the garden knife. And as always, this will just help me to stick this in the ground, move some soil, put the plant in, and go to the next one. And with all that said, I'm gonna get going. All right, well, I almost never do this, but with one of those peppers, I pulled just a little too hard, and I think I probably dispatched it. So what I think is gonna happen is the rabbit is gonna be making its way over here, and hopefully it's gonna avoid that path. It's gonna be like over here in the middle, and it's gonna take a bite out of a really spicy pepper, and it's not gonna wanna come back. Yeah, I don't think this plant has a shot in me. I might have to go with a traditional net or a fence. And instead of marking every single one of these with a popsicle stick, because I don't feel like writing that many stakes out, I just decided to mark the start and the end, so you'll know where it starts and ends. And I used to scatter my plants, but now I just like to keep them in groups so I know what they are. It's just a little easier to identify. All right, so I just counted and I got 22 peppers planted in the ground, and I got a whole bunches of onions planted as well. So I just decided why not? I would just take a few of the plugs out of here that I seeded not too long ago, and we've already got a ton of onions, so why not just put a bunch of those in the ground already? But these peppers are now planted and they look pretty good to me. And unfortunately, I am out of sunlight, so I gotta get things cleaned up, head inside and have some meatballs, and we'll be back out here for the next task. Where's he going? Turkey snuck under the fence. Hey. All right, so it's just a couple days later, and I'm taking a look at how the peppers are doing. And we got quite a bit of rain this morning. We might have actually gotten between 1 and 2 inches of rain. And I think some of these peppers have just been beaten down a little bit too hard by the rain. So I brought the sisal back out here, and I was thinking I would just tie some of these ones that are falling over, just tie them up to the stake so they have a better chance. So we really got a pretty hard rain, and some of these leaves are really covered here in dirt. And I really don't like to micromanage the plants like this. But when this leaf is 40% of its energy collection, it makes sense to try to help it out a little bit. So I only tied up a few of those, and the reason for that is putting the stakes in is actually going to make these plants a little bit weaker. These plants were started indoors and they haven't had as much of the airflow that they would expect to see outside, and so they don't really develop as much stabilization as plants that start outside and deal with the wind and natural elements. So next up for today, I still have to take care of a few of those broccoli and cauliflower replacements, and then I'm also going to get started on planting some tomatoes. But before I do, we're close, but no red strawberries yet as far as I can tell. And this is the time of year where the older red leaves start to make you think that there's some red strawberries in there. False alarm, but it's looking good. And in this back corner, I don't know if you guys know what that is. I'll give you a second to guess amongst yourselves. And if there's only one of you, well, you and I, here, we are guessing at what this thing is. Begins with an R, followed by a hue. And I guess there's two names in there. There's Hugh and there's Barb. And there's an R. It's rhubarb. I'm surrounded by frogs. So my tent was supposed to keep the water out of the trays, but clearly I need a new tent. Somehow, amongst all that rain, these are actually pretty dry, and instead of dumping one of those trays, I should have just put these in there. So this is a broccoli that went missing a few days ago. I don't think I'm gonna be putting up any signs or posters on telephone poles. I think I'm just gonna go ahead and put a new one in there. And keep in mind, if you take a stake like this and you put it in after you plant it, just don't put it through the root ball. Try to put it enough to the side where you're not going to pierce through the roots. So this is a Fujiyama cauliflower, and I can't help but wonder if maybe these are slugs doing this damage. Cauliflower is almost still there, it just lost pretty much everything. So no sense in hoping that's gonna grow. Well, we got all this. And looks like we got another one right here that's been taking some damage. This is a Punta Verde, which doesn't look good at all. And it can be this kind of thing that really deters gardeners from really wanting to keep gardening. But the most important thing to remember is that there are ways to solve these problems. And my first answer is just having backups. So you're gonna lose some of your plants no matter what. So if you only have a couple plants, the odds are that you might have less fruit at the end of the year. But the most important thing to think of when this happens is not, why me, why my garden? It happens to everyone, just in different ways. And there's almost always a way to solve for it. And now you can't go back in time and stop whatever ate your plants from eating it, but you can take this time to be proactive about preventing it from happening even further. And having backup plants and a plan is the best way to approach this. All right, so now that the replacements are in the ground, that brings me to my second plan of attack here, and that is to use Sluggo. Now, Sluggo is supposed to be pretty safe for the garden, and since I suspect that a lot of that damage could be due to slugs, I'm just gonna go ahead and sprinkle a little bit of this around each of the plants. And as far as using this goes, it's about as easy as you could imagine. Just open up the top, and it's kind of like a Parmesan cheese grater here. We're just going around and shaking a little set of these pellets out here. And while we're at it, we're gonna do the broccoli too. All right, well, today is May 16th. It's the midpoint of May, and nothing makes me want to transplant plants more than just thinking about the fact that we're already halfway through May. And at this time of year, there's really nothing stopping you from putting these plants in the ground outside of, well, yourself. So with that said, I'm gonna be working on my tomatoes today, and just look at how nice all of these tomatoes are looking. They're looking a little too nice, if you know what I mean. I think I'm a little bit worried about these getting a little bit root bound, but I do have one trick that will help with that, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. But first, I want to remind myself which tomatoes I started this year and make a quick list and write out some popsicle sticks before I plant them. There's nothing worse than planting all of these and then telling yourself, I'll remember that, because you won't. So the worst looking ones I think are on this side, and it's just because they're falling over. I've done something off here. So these are strawberry fields, and these are big beef, and they look similar. They're both beefsteak tomatoes, and I'd like to plant a couple of those today, so I'm gonna go ahead and write those down. So those are the 2022 big beef, and I write them at the top of the stick so that when I put this in the dirt, the first 3 to 4 inches goes in and the top can still stick out. So I actually have 4 more trays, and I'll just tell you what these are, and then I'll just zoom through writing them. So we've got Early Girl and Lemon Boy, and Early Girl is supposed to be one that fruits earlier in the season, but I didn't really see that much of that last year. Lemon Boy is kind of a medium-sized lemon or a yellow, and they're both about the same size, really, which is why I put those to start in the same tray. I figured they would just grow at the same pace. This one here, we've got San Marzano and Romas, and these are also both similar type tomatoes, so I planted these in the same tray. And it's really interesting to see how these almost look fairly similar. They're tall, straight, and the San Marzanos, they look a little nicer than my Romas, but those Roma seeds were like 5 years old, so pretty happy that those are still kicking. And over here, we've got Sun Gold and Apple Yellow, and these are all the cherry tomatoes, or at least those are both cherry tomatoes. And both the Apple Yellow and the Sun Gold have really become my favorites, or my go-tos. Everyone loves Sun Gold, and the Apple Yellow is probably a little bit less popular, but it's a little bit more beefy for a cherry tomato, and I really do like that about it. And then over here, these are the staples. These are the Gardener's Delight and the Winter Red. So that's all the tomatoes I have. Now I'm just gonna quickly write a bunch of labels. So I've got 20 tomatoes that I want to go plant, and I'm going to do that right now. This place is getting noisy. These frogs are going nuts. Extra long bamboo skewers. Since we're planting tomatoes, I thought I would skip the small skewers and go straight to the big ones. These are the extra long bamboo skewers. So this is what they look like. They're actually pretty pointy. And this is really making me wonder, whose barbecue do I have to go to get me some of these? You can also use these as a classroom pointer. This right here, that's a tomato. These are gonna hold up the tomatoes for a little bit longer than the smaller ones that I have. So might as well just go straight to the tall ones here. So this section right behind me is where I'm gonna start for my tomatoes. The good thing about this section is that it's been covered with landscape fabric for a while now. So there's really not many weeds, so it'll only take a few seconds to get those weeds out. And since it's never really steered me wrong, I'm gonna stick with the square foot gardening method. Right back there is about 3 feet wide, but since we've got our skewer, and these are 3 feet, let's see. Yeah, that's about 3 feet. So I'm planning on planting in a grid pattern here, and we're gonna do 2 perpendicular to that walkway there. And the spacing will be about every 1 to 1.5 feet. So I think I could do 2, 4, 6, 8. And then I actually get pretty close to this kiwi right behind me. And I'm thinking that the vines plus the kiwi vines is just gonna be a lot to deal with and manage throughout the season. So I'll probably just stick to putting some peppers under those last few feet there. And then I have this section down in here, which is kind of littered with onions. And while I was hoping that I was gonna see some artichoke volunteers this year, I haven't really seen anything yet of promise. So I'm gonna go ahead and weed that out, and then I should be able to put another 12 in there, which between the two should be those 20. Why don't we go ahead and get planting? So the first 10 are in, and I was planning on doing 8, but just like every other gardener that's ever existed, the urge to overplant is just too powerful, and I figured, hey, I can fit 2 more in there. So that's what happened. But just a couple things to note. I like these stakes. They're a good height. They're gonna last these plants for about a month maybe, and then I'll have to find something else to tie to. These are planted just below this trellis, so I can tie to this trellis. And that will probably be enough for these plants over the course of their plant life. And one really important thing to know about tomatoes is that these little tiny hairs down here, those are all actually roots. So it's generally good practice to plant the tomato down an extra inch or 2 below where it was already coming out of the soil. And in this case, since these leaves are touching, I'm just gonna pop those leaves right off. And it's gonna do just fine because each one of these are roots, and it's gonna continue to grow out from there. So the height of the tomato actually just got a bit lower because we planted that a little bit lower in the ground, but it's gonna lead to a healthier and more productive tomato. And as always, it can be pretty easy to snap those tomatoes when we're tying sisal to it. When you're doing this, you don't need to go all the way up to the stem of the tomato. It's better to leave a little bit of space and not over tighten it because it's very easy to snap it. What this knot is really just doing is keeping the tomato from falling over, and it doesn't have to be pulled all the way up. And the bees are already coming out to check out the tomatoes here. So the sun is actually pretty strong today, so I'm gonna go ahead and get those other plants planted quickly. So let's do that.